Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Chapter 39. Into the Unknown. He wasn't sure what would happen when he returned. After he left his comfort zone to explore new territories, he struggled with the memories of his past, the pleasure of validation and appreciation, the pain of rejection and a glut of unexpected turmoil that overwhelmed everything else. The fact that he had to return at some point, if only to confront his past and put it behind for good or ill, was a pervasive reminder he couldn't ignore. What he would do and how he would do it were questions that he couldn't answer, not as he was. But there was no escaping the inevitable. He had to return. If he was going to return, he had to change. It took him time, far more time than he thought, to figure out what to say and who he wanted to be, but he did it. He struggled through harsh trials that challenged everything he was, and fought harder than he ever had to survive, to not die and be forgotten in the sands of time. In doing so, he had been able to climb out of the hole he'd fallen into. He was able to return with fresh eyes and a stronger heart. Realizing that he wasn't alone galvanized him and comforted him, because even if things didn't go as expected, he'd be able to roll with the punches as they came and learn from them. He returned. He won the battle against himself. And here he stood, ready to dive into the unknown. So after everything that happened, the fact that Kurenai was still acting like his loving girlfriend was a slap in the face. Everything Naruto fought for and all the tears he spilled couldn't have been for nothing. She robbed him of so much, and it took all of his training to keep himself from exploding. These feelings still threatened to boil over, but he set his hands on the sink's edges and breathed in. They simmered and seethed, yet in the end, he was able to find his calm. With that calm, came clarity. And with that clarity, he was able to process what had happened. It was better that he let her squirm, because he needed to see that this wasn't just a mission to her. Hearing her praise his progress or compliment his looks was nice, but it wasn't proof that her feelings were real. Neither was seeing her wear the bracelet he had given her. Admittedly, it was pretty nice that she'd kept it after all this time. He remembered how emotional she was after he gave it to her, and he had a feeling she remembered, too. It was also a nice gesture that let her remind him about their relationship without having to say a word, something that let him see right through her clever ruse. If she was acting, she was doing a great job, because her apology was incredibly sincere. She cared enough to apologize for rejecting him, and she cared enough to make it sound and look heartfelt. Not only that, she accepted his rejection with grace and understanding, rather than manipulate him further. It was consistent with everything he knew about her, but even then, that still could have been a lie. Her mission was ongoing. In a weird way, it would have been easier if she wasn't trying so hard to respect his feelings. If he saw that she was pregnant, for example, he would have ended their joke of a relationship right there and then. But she wasn't pregnant. Things weren't that simple. There were so many ways he imagined their conversation going, but it ended in a way that made things more complicated for him. He was wrong to assume that nothing had changed. In spite of everything he learned, he still couldn't tell what was truth and what was lies. He wasn't going to complain, though. When all was said and done, he'd make sure that everything was resolved, on his terms. It had to be on his terms. This loyalty mission had been done without his say, without considering how it would affect him. He wasn't going to let them apologize unless he asked for one. He was done being jerked around. At the very least, some things about Kurenai were starting to make sense. She'd always been hesitant about getting intimate with him, and now he knew it wasn't his fault. She was afraid of herself. Maybe it had something to do with her mission. Being afraid wasn't enough to explain everything, though, and speculating about her motives wouldn't solve a thing. After all, a more disturbing truth had made itself quite apparent during this reunion. His feelings for her hadn't waned a bit. They were still there, as fresh and vibrant as they had been when Kurenai became his girlfriend, and try as he might, he couldn't deny that fact when it was staring him right in the face. It was frightening. That didn't mean he was going to crawl back to her. The web of lies that Kurenai spun to keep him ensnared in her clutches hadn't disappeared just because his feelings for her still lingered in his heart. He just wished this weren't so complicated. There was something missing when Naruto woke up the next day. It wasn't his rest. He'd slept well once he got used to taking up more space in his old bed. It wasn't the toothpaste in his mouth or the fragrance of the soap he used, since they were practically the same. It wasn't even the clothes he wore or the apartment itself. No, it was the first time in nearly 3 years that he'd woken up alone. Jiraiya had kept him company over the years, and when he left, Samui took his place. Now, he was back on his own. It was such a drag, but he'd always appreciate having a place to call home. After waiting 3 minutes for his ramen to boil, couldn't they have made an instant ramen that was actually instant? He enjoyed his breakfast like he always had. Kurenai had been courteous enough to stock his fridge and cupboards with fresh milk and instant ramen, along with some vegetables and rice. Once he got into the groove of his missions, he tried to find time to cook his own meals, since rations wouldn't hack it and there were times where he couldn't eat at a restaurant. He couldn't let a lack of nutrition cut into his performance. Maybe he'd thank Kurenai for maintaining his apartment, since she didn't have to do it. When he finished his breakfast, he cleaned his dishes and threw out his garbage in the nearby bin. Before he left for the village, he'd have to visit his landlord, so that he could figure out when his rent would be paid. He'd get his locks changed, as well, just to be safe. It was a familiar routine that he fell into with ease, but he couldn't shake that missing feeling. Hopefully, Samui was coping with it better than he was. They'd be eating breakfast at this point. She was quiet when she ate, but she wasn't distant. She was always willing to answer any questions he had, and as they grew more familiar with each other, she started asking him questions, as well. He grabbed his gear and left his apartment, locking the door behind him. He sensed his surroundings to see if his landlord was awake. He was, but someone else was making a beeline for his apartment. They perched on the rails of his balcony, clad in the Leaf's Anbu uniform. The ninja was wearing a cat mask, and her purple hair was still long and lush. "Good morning," Naruto said. "Good morning, and welcome back. You're on duty today, aren't you?" She pushed her mask to the top of her head, revealing her brown eyes and heart-shaped face. "I am, but Lady Hokage gave me permission to reveal myself to you." She smiled. "It's good to see you, Naruto." Naruto returned the smile. "You too, Yugao." Yugao climbed onto the floor next to him. "How have the years been treating you?" "It's been great. I got to see a lot of different places and I made a bunch of good friends." "How about you?" Yugao beamed. "I got engaged to my boyfriend, Hayate." Naruto's smile grew. "Really? Congratulations." In spite of his own troubles with romance, he wasn't so jaded that he couldn't appreciate two people finding love. "Thank you. We haven't had much time to plan a big wedding or anything, but we've already moved in and made some plans to get everything settled." "When did you get engaged?" Yugao clutched her wrist, holding her hands beneath her waist. "Sometime after our mission with the Crimson Hand ended. At the same time we returned to the Hidden Leaf, Hayate had returned from his own mission in the Land of Water. Even though his mission was a success, it took his toll on him. I'd never seen him so sick." "Did he catch a disease or something?" Naruto asked. She shook her head. "Hayate has a chronic illness. There's no cure for it as of now, but the symptoms are easy to treat. However, Hayate sustained an injury that got infected, and it took him time for him to recover. He told me how the mission made him decide to stop leaving what really mattered for an uncertain future. As soon as he was cleared, he proposed to me. I accepted." Naruto smiled. "I'm happy for you guys." "I'm happy, too. He's a good man, and I've learned so much from him. Knowing that I can return to him gives me a bit more certainty whenever I'm away." The mere fact that he had a home to sleep in and return to was empowering in its own way, because rent aside, he had a place he could call his own. Whether someone would join him in his apartment remained to be seen, but he enjoyed the security and stability that came from a good woman watching his back. "Have you guys gone on missions together?" Naruto asked. "Unfortunately, no. I've been in Anbu for over a decade now, and Hayate never joined our ranks. His skills were better suited in the open. He did tutor me in Kenjutsu, though." "Cool. Speaking of Kenjutsu, I see you got yourself a tanto," Yugao said, glancing at his hip. He unsheathed it, letting her take a good look at it. "I imagine you only need this for a close-range option, since it's not your main avenue of attack." "You're right. If I had a katana, I would have better control over the space between me and my enemy, but with this, I can slip past my enemy's defenses and put them under pressure." Yugao nodded. You can also use it to score a clean kill after your genjutsu lands. More importantly, it gives you more space than a kunai would in case your target dispels your genjutsu. Fights can often come down to a matter of centimeters, but I'm sure you know all this already. Naruto smiled. It's good to get a reminder from an expert. Well, you're going to need it. Yugao's expression turned serious. Lady Hokage wants you to be at Training Ground 3 tomorrow, at noon. Prepare to fight against a close quarters specialist. He rubbed the back of his neck. Did she say who'd I'd be fighting? I will say that you won't be fighting me. Naruto let his hand fall to his side. His smile disappeared. I'll be ready. Good. That's all I have for today, but I'll be sure to come visit when I have the time. Yugao put her mask back on, leaving him after exchanging goodbyes. If he was going to fight someone, he had to get ready, and that meant there was no time to waste. Naruto got things sorted out with his landlord. His apartment's locks had been changed, and now he knew when he'd have to pay his rent. It turned out that Tsunade had frozen his lease while he was away, which was pretty nice of her. He also found out that his landlord was familiar enough with Kurenai to let her inside his apartment, so he made sure that she couldn't enter without his explicit permission. After that, he went to the waterfall he was so familiar with and trained. Along with his regular physical exercises, he also took a crack at figuring out how to combine wind chakra with genjutsu. Nailing the right balance had been pretty tricky. His problem was that he couldn't figure out the right balance of chakra to make it work. Using his sensor let him gauge how much chakra he was exerting, but it didn't supply the ratio he needed. The genjutsu still had to affect his enemy, so it couldn't be overwhelmed by the elemental chakra. At the same time, using a little bit of elemental chakra would defeat the purpose of using this elemental genjutsu. He might as well use regular genjutsu, in that case. In the end, he was able to figure it out with only a few hours of experimentation. Doing it was exactly how Kurenai had explained it. Mold the genjutsu first before weaving the elemental ninjutsu around it, while making sure that the chakra ratio was equal. He'd keep his gratitude to himself. There was a place he wanted to go to, but first, he marched to the waterfall. With only a slight twist of his hands, Naruto sliced the waterfall in half. He pulled his hands back and shook off the water, smiling at his handiwork. The heartbreak and grief he'd struggled with back then wasn't as distant as he liked, neither was the memory of using training as an escape. He knew better than to do so now, but back then, he hadn't. Then Shizune had whisked him away to another mission, triggering the beginning of the end. He didn't know anything, back then, and to be honest, he still didn't know much. But he had to survive if he wanted to live, and he had to fight if he wanted to survive. Maybe there would be a time where he didn't have to fight anymore, but that day was far, far away. He could still take a break, so he left his little clearing and ran. It was almost noon, so it'd be easy to catch a nice lunch. However, someone was chasing after him, and when he sensed their chakra, he pulled to a stop at the edge of the forest. The man caught up to him in a couple of seconds, smiling widely. Running away from me, are you? Is that any way to treat your sensei? Naruto grinned. It's not my fault if you can't keep up, pervy sage. Jiraiya laughed. I didn't know you were a comedian, Naruto. Well, laugh it up, Naruto said, fighting the urge to laugh himself. When did you get back? This morning. I came to give Tsunade some important intel about the Akatsuki. Jiraiya frowned. They captured the three tails. A scowl split his face. Really? What about the Jinchuriki? There wasn't a Jinchuriki, Jiraiya said. The three tails' previous Jinchuriki died over 3 years ago. The three tails reformed recently and the Akatsuki struck. Naruto swallowed down the nausea attacking his stomach. Two-tailed beasts in less than 2 weeks. Jiraiya crossed his arms. I don't think this was a coincidence. They were testing how the hidden villages would react by striking different places with different teams. Even if some of their ninja died, they would succeed if they managed to capture even one-tailed beast. Do you think they knew where Yugito would be? Naruto asked. I doubt it, but it doesn't really matter, either. They saw an opportunity, and they struck. Thanks to you, they failed. The important thing is that we have more information about their ninja and we know how they operate. Don't lament what you couldn't do. Be proud of what you already achieved. He smiled. Riley, take whatever victories you can, right? You got it. There weren't many times that he disagreed with Jiraiya. Most of the time, what he said made sense. Jiraiya had a way of helping him understand things he wasn't sure about, and on the off chance he didn't agree, he could see where his sensei was coming from. From what he knew, it took the Akatsuki about 3 days to extract a tailed beast, so he had time before Hidan and Kakuzu came back. Is that the only reason why you came back? Naruto asked. Of course not. You're here, aren't you? Naruto chuckled. Yeah, I am. So, have you been keeping up with your training? The grin on Jiraiya's face made Naruto think that Jiraiya wanted to ask another question entirely. When he sent letters to Jiraiya, he kept them brief, since he was sure he'd see him again. Now that they were together, it was a good time as any to fill him in on the details. I have, Naruto said. I got to learn how to use this Tonto, and I can sense this other energy all around me. How does that energy feel? Like it's alive. Just sensing it makes the energy vibrate. Have you tried to interact with it? Jiraiya asked. Naruto shook his head. Good. I'd say with a bit more practice, you can start learning how to harness that energy. His eyes widened. Really? Jiraiya smiled. Trust me, it's like nothing you've ever felt. Naruto frowned. Did it compare to the Nine Tails' power? Nothing does, the Nine Tails responded. Well, that certainly settled it. Although, it did bring another thing to mind. Sensei, I started harnessing the Nine Tails chakra. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. You did. When? After we came back from the land of snow. The Nine Tails helped me during that mission, so I spoke to it and we made a new agreement. Since then, I've been using its chakra whenever I need to, and I'm up to 3 tails right now. And why do you want to use the Nine Tails chakra? He asked, suspicion coloring his words. Naruto made eye contact with his sensei, devoid of fear. I have to use everything I can to beat the Akatsuki. And my dad thinks I can handle this. Jiraiya didn't respond. Seconds passed, then he exhaled. I thought about training you to use more of the Nine Tails chakra, but with how you were, it was too risky. I didn't want to make things worse for you. But now, you're telling me you've improved your control all on your own. Well, I'm impressed. Naruto smiled. Thanks, sensei. I'm being careful. I know that I can't rely on the Nine Tails' power, it's not mine. Jiraiya's eyebrow furrowed. No, it's not. What's talking to the nine-tailed fox like? Naruto bit his lip. It's pretty intimidating, and scary. Really conceited. But ever since we made this deal, it hasn't been so bad. It even helped me rescue and heal Yugito. I don't have to tell you to be careful, but for now, keep it up. It'd be better if the nine-tailed fox isn't our enemy, don't you think? I agree. Jiraiya smiled. Good man. Now that that's settled, why don't you tell me how those missions went? Did Samui take good care of you? Yeah, she did, Naruto said, smiling. It almost looked like lights were flashing in Jiraiya's eyes. In that case, tell me everything. Don't leave out even one tiny detail. Can I ask you something first? Jiraiya nearly deflated. Really? Can it wait? It'll be quick, Naruto said. Jiraiya waved a dismissive hand. Why is it that you get all weird whenever I talk to another girl? First it was Tenten, then it was Temari, and now it's Samui. I'm no cheater. Jiraiya smirked. Can you blame me if I want to see you end up with a good woman? If something goes wrong with your current relationship, you can't be hung up on it forever. You're a young man, and you have to make the most of your opportunities before they disappear. Naruto frowned. Then why do you keep on chasing after Grandma Tsunade? A sort of wistful sadness enveloped his aged face. My relationship with Tsunade is a bit different. I'm not chasing after her so I can make love to the most beautiful woman on earth. I've already done that. His eyes nearly shot out of their sockets. Huh. Jiraiya rubbed his nose with his thumb and grinned. Who do you think I am? My reputation isn't just for show. He suddenly frowned. The thing is, it almost came out of nowhere. A few years ago, I was trying to get Tsunade to come back home. I did my whole routine, but this time, it was actually working. She was opening up to me and laughing at my jokes. So I asked her if she wanted to continue the fun in my room. Did she say no? She said yes. I couldn't believe my luck, and I kept on thinking that the other shoe would drop. But it didn't. We had a great time together. His eyes glazed over for a moment, then he blinked. I knew something was up, though. She hid it well, but she was feeling really lonely. I had a feeling this was a one-time deal, but well, I had to be there for her in her time of need. Naruto hung onto his sensei's every word. This wasn't just some old crush or fantasy, this was something deeper. You really like her, don't you? She's the one. She always has been. It's far from what I imagined our relationship being, but I appreciate what we have. Naruto smiled, to encourage Jiraiya. You still have a chance, sensei. I know, Jiraiya said. I know, he smiled. But enough about my misadventures. What about yours? He thought about giving Jiraiya a brief account of how things went with Samui, but with how he'd opened up to him about his feelings for Tsunade, it didn't seem right for him to clam up. Maybe Jiraiya could help him make sense of what he was feeling. I almost had sex with Samui, Naruto said. Jiraiya sputtered. What? You're joking. I'm not. Why don't you start from the beginning? Naruto took a second to gather his thoughts. Then he gave Jiraiya a rundown of how his relationship with Samui evolved, from the shaky beginnings to the day Tsunade ended their partnership. Jiraiya was frowning by the end, but not from disapproval. Why weren't you ready? Naruto let out a sharp breath. Normally, he wouldn't say a word, but Jiraiya was taking this really seriously, asking him actual questions instead of joking around about how he nearly got laid by his hot teammate or whatever. I didn't know if Samui's feelings for me were real. The Raikage could have sent her on a mission to seduce me or something because of who my dad was. But he didn't. I thought so, Jiraiya said. She didn't seem like the type. It's possible that she was acting aloof so you'd get invested in figuring her out, but she was also uncomfortable when I complimented her looks. Naruto frowned. She doesn't like it when people ogle her. That's why I backed off. His frown waned a bit. Good job, sensei. He trailed off, thinking about if he could leave it there and be fine, or if he could keep on going. Good thing you didn't cheat on Kurenai. Yeah, I didn't want Samui to get involved in all that. Or give Kurenai any sort of advantage she could use against him. But most of all, I just wasn't ready, Naruto said. And I didn't want to hurt Samui by ruining her expectations. It's better not to force it, Jiraiya said, but he didn't elaborate. It would have been the perfect chance to tease him, yet he wasn't taking it. Tell me, Naruto, do you like Samui? The sudden question caught Naruto off guard. Jiraiya was scrutinizing him. He wouldn't let him go without an answer, which was good. He wasn't going to run away from it. Yeah, I like her, Naruto said. I really like her. I can be myself around her. I enjoy her company, and I trust her a lot. She gets angry at times and she's kind of spiteful, but she's a good person. She's honest and straightforward. She's helped me with a lot. What about Kurenai? Are you still interested in her? Naruto shut his eyes. I don't know. He opened his eyes. They were starting to sting. I know that she's sorry for what she did, but I can't trust her. Jiraiya's gaze was piercing, but he gave Naruto another nod. The thing is, I still have feelings for her that won't go away. If that's how it is, you'll have to ask yourself if you can forgive her. If you can, then you can try to work with her to rebuild the trust you lost. Forgive her. That was out of the question. It's your choice, Jiraiya said, like he understood completely. If you don't trust her, you don't have to. Naruto nodded, not willing to say anything. He waited for Jiraiya to ask another question, but his lips were closed as he stared at a nearby tree. Nobody had come across them throughout this entire conversation, but very few people came to this forest in the first place. Would you have slept with Samui if you weren't with Kurenai? Jiraiya asked, breaking the silence. Naruto pursed his lips. Yeah, I would. He still didn't know if he'd able to show her a good time, but there wouldn't be much keeping him bound. The fear wouldn't be as great. Does Samui know that you're in a relationship? I only told her after she asked me to sleep with her. Jiraiya frowned. Bad move. Why did you let her think she had a chance? Naruto flinched. He balled his fists up, trying to stave off the pressure before it mounted. I didn't think that she was looking for a relationship or sex, and I wasn't willing to go that far, either. I'd never mislead her, never. What if she didn't take your rejection well? Jiraiya asked. You'd hurt her way more than if you made it clear where you stood from the beginning. Heat crept up his neck like molten lava. I just didn't want to make things worse. We're partners. Jiraiya sighed. That's why it's better to be honest. You might think you're saving her from heartbreak, but you're just bottling everything up and hoping that she does what you want. Rejection hurts either way, but that pain is temporary. Betrayal cuts far deeper. Naruto made his fists loosen up, took in a deep breath. I know. Then make things clear with Samui and Kurenai. If you want to be with Samui, then tell her how you feel. If you want to work things out with Kurenai or you want to move on, then let her know. But don't leave either of them in the dark. I won't, Naruto said. Jiraiya put his hand on his shoulder. We'll leave it there, I'll leave it at that. I'll be in the village for a couple of days, so if you need me, I'll see you at the hot springs. Naruto cracked a smile, while Jiraiya winked. You know as well as I do that my research never ends, but I might have to find other ways to do it. I know who you can ask, Naruto said. Jiraiya's grip on his shoulder tightened. Don't say it, I don't want to get my hopes up. Then I won't. And, sensei, Naruto smiled. Thanks for the advice. Jiraiya smiled. That's what I'm here for. A moment later, Jiraiya left Naruto for what he would call greener pastures. He wasn't sure if Jiraiya would actually skip out on visiting the hot springs, but if he knew one thing about the pervy sage, he'd get his research done, one way or the other. Naruto decided to grab lunch first, and there was no better place to do it than Ichiraku Ramen. Someone he recognized was already eating there, meaning that he'd have company while he dug into a nice, warm bowl of ramen. Once he entered the ramen stand, he immediately took his seat in the booth. Naruto, it's great to see you, Chuki said. You too, old man, Naruto said, smiling widely. Hey, Ayame. Ayame smiled at him. Welcome back, Naruto. Did you enjoy your trip? I sure did. Naruto faced his fellow customer. Hi, Samui. Hello, Naruto, Samui said. I didn't think you'd come here. You told me about this place, she said. I thought I'd check it out. Naruto smiled. You made the right choice. This place has the best ramen in the world. Chuki grimaced. About that, we changed our menu, Ayame said. Now we serve dipping noodles instead of ramen. The broth and the noodles are served separately, which lets you dip the noodles inside the broth. Naruto kept his smile plastered on his face. That's really nice and all, but where's the ramen? Ayame put her hands on her hips. Ramen is a relic of the past, Naruto. Times change and if we want to keep ahead of the competition, we have to adapt. Naruto forced himself to keep his jaw from hanging wide open. A relic. Ramen is timeless. And besides, this is Ichiraku Ramen, not Ichiraku dipping noodles. This is the first time I've been here in almost 3 years, can't you make an exception? Come on, Chuki, back me up here. I'm sorry, Naruto, but this really means a lot to Ayame, Chuki said. Naruto put his arms on the counter, but before he could launch himself into more hysterics, he heard someone giggle. It wasn't Ayame and it certainly wasn't Chuki. His head swiveled in Samui's direction, and she was laughing. He was utterly transfixed, almost forgetting the travesty that had just occurred. The sound of her laughter was delicate, but it was clear, unrestrained. Her eyes locked onto his. They were glittering like the ocean at sunset. What's so funny? Naruto asked. I never thought you were this passionate about ramen, Samui said. I have to have it, Samui. It's like you in history books. Good ramen was good ramen, and Ichiraku's couldn't be beat, so being told that he couldn't have ramen at Ichiraku Ramen was unimaginable. This might not be ramen, but it's pretty good, Samui said. She waved her hand over her bowl of dipping noodles. Try them. It wasn't that they'd be bad, but he wanted ramen. Really badly. When he looked at Ayame and Chuki, he immediately felt like a real jerk for making such a racket. Fine, Naruto said. I'll have 1 bowl of dipping noodles, please. Ayame smiled. Coming right up. She had his bowls prepared in an instant, pouring the broth in one and the noodles in the other. He was tempted, so tempted to just mix the bowls together, but it wouldn't hurt to try this new thing out. Naruto picked up his chopsticks, took some noodles and dipped them in the broth before putting them in his mouth. He chewed for a bit, before swallowing. The broth and the noodles are lighter than the ramen normally is, Naruto said. You still use that nutritious stuff. We sure do, Chuki said. When you were gone, Ayame introduced a diet ramen to our menu. It was a huge hit, so we decided to make it a feature for all our meals. Naruto smiled, digging into the dipping noodles with gusto. The taste was still incredibly delicious, satisfying his hunger. It's better than I thought. See, Ayame said. From behind her back, Chuki gave him a thumbs up. Meanwhile, Samui was still working through her own bowl. Say, how did you meet Samui, Naruto? Chuki asked. We actually met after the Chunin exams ended, Naruto said. But we started working together a few months ago. Is that right? Did you have fun, Dad? Ayame said. In spite of her admonishment, she was itching to see his reaction. I did, Naruto said, smiling. He wasn't embarrassed to be around a pretty girl, not anymore. Out of the corner of his eye, Naruto noticed Samui finishing off her bowl. She wiped her mouth with a napkin, the picture of relaxed decorum. How did you two grow so close to Naruto? Samui asked. We've been serving Naruto ramen for years, Chuki said. It isn't an exaggeration to say that he's our best and favorite customer. Naruto grinned. Well, you guys have been real good to me. And your food is amazing. Even the dipping noodles? Ayame asked. Yeah, even that, Naruto said. He faced Samui. I'm going to get another bowl. What about you? I can eat some more, Samui said. Ayame smiled, and along with her dad, she got to work on preparing their food. This place is pretty cool, Samui told him. I can see why you like it so much. I'm glad you're here with me, Naruto said. So am I. He'd always wanted to introduce his girlfriend to Chuki and Ayame, but that plan hadn't panned out like he wanted. In a way, he was still able to fulfill that wish with Samui. It was a bit of a challenge to get used to this new way of eating noodles. Mixing the broth with the noodles combined the flavors and made something entirely new. It was half of the appeal of ramen. Dipping the noodles in the broth forced him to slow down, giving him time to reflect on the flavor. Would it change if he added meat or vegetables to the mix? Would they be served in separate bowls as well? He never doubted their skill. It would just take more time before he accepted this as the new normal. Once he finished, he pulled out some money to pay for the meal. At least dipping noodles were slightly cheaper than regular ramen. Thanks for coming, Naruto, Chuki said. And Samui, it was nice to meet you. Samui nodded. The feeling's mutual. Thank you for taking care of Naruto. Don't mention it, Ayame said. And Naruto, you'd better not be afraid to bring Samui back with you, you hear? I hear you, Naruto said. All smiles, Naruto left the ramen stand, Samui following close behind. Are you busy? Naruto asked. No, Samui said. I already sent my report to Lord Raikage. When are you guys gonna leave? Tomorrow. It wasn't a lot of time. Jiraiya's advice came to mind. There's a place I want to go, Naruto said. Want to come with me? She smiled at him. Sure. Naruto took Samui to the memorial stone. He had to visit it, but while he wanted to do it on his own, he was glad he had company. This stone was made to commemorate the ninja who gave their lives to protect our village, Naruto said. We remember their sacrifices and their lives, so they won't be forgotten. Samui nodded. We don't have a memorial stone in the hidden cloud, but we also try to keep our fallen comrades' memories alive. Naruto turned away from Samui and searched the memorial stone until he found what he was looking for. Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki's names were still next to each other, but now he knew why it was so fitting. Is there someone you know on this stone? Samui asked. My parents. My condolences. When he glanced at Samui, he saw a frown on her face. It's okay, Naruto said. He frowned as well. I never got a chance to meet them. I'd want to meet them, too. I imagine they're good people. Naruto chuckled. They are. Samui gazed at the stone, as if she was looking for his parents' names. Do you think they'd be proud of you? I hope so. Jiraiya had said that they would be proud of what he had achieved, and while he knew Jiraiya wasn't just saying that, he still wondered. Knowing that he'd never have parents was one thing, but now that he knew who they were and what they fought for, it felt like he lost something special even though it was something he never had. The fact that it took this long for him to know left a truly bitter taste in his mouth, but he'd never forget, and he'd do everything he could to keep their memory alive. Naruto spent the next hour standing in front of the memorial stone, thinking about his parents and everything that led him to this point. He took some time to examine the stone. Samui took an interest in the names, too, so they spent time looking at them. There were names he recognized from Hidden Leaf, a history, and others that he knew from stories Kakashi told him about. Both of Kakashi's teammates were on the stone, just like he said. It was interesting that Obito Uchiha was one of the last Uchiha names on the memorial stone, but then again, the Uchiha were all murdered by one of their own, in their own homes. It was also quite fortunate that nobody he knew personally was on this stone. Not only would that pain be hard to bear, he spent far too much time wallowing in the past already. He took a step back and stared at Samui. "Let's go. You gotta see everything cool before you go." Samui raised an eyebrow. "Everything. You know what I mean. Then what are we waiting for?" Naruto spent the rest of the day escorting Samui around the Leaf Village. He showed her the hot springs, where they took a dip inside. There were times where they visited mixed hot springs and relaxed together, but the Leaf's hot springs separated men and women, which was fine with him. He couldn't sense Jiraiya, so either he wasn't around or he could still avoid his sensor. After their soak in the hot springs, Naruto showed Samui his personal training clearing. She marveled at the waterfall's warmth, and he demonstrated his ability to cut it in two, much to her approval. He showed her a few more places as well. Fortunately, nobody he knew came across them. While he wouldn't have minded meeting Shikamaru, it wouldn't be nice if Kurenai found them. It was unfortunate that their time together was limited, since he wanted to find livelier places that he never got to visit and take her there. But he resolved to make the most of his circumstances. Before he knew it, sunset was less than 10 minutes away. He was about to escort her back to her hotel, but when he offered to do so, she declined. "I want to see where you live," Samui said. Naruto shrugged. They weren't far from his house. As soon as they reached the red light district, he grabbed her wrist and took her to their destination with the body flicker. He led her inside and showed her around. It was bigger than any hotel room he'd ever been in, but it was still a pretty humble place. Still, it was home. While they practically lived together for almost 6 months, showing Samui where he lived was a pretty big step forward. Part of him imagined her bringing her clothes inside or putting her favorite foods in the fridge. Something that said she called his apartment home. "Not bad," Samui said, after they returned to his front door. "Do you have any plans tomorrow?" "The Hokage wants me to fight someone," Naruto said. "She set up the fight because she was thinking about promoting me." "Any advice?" "Make sure you keep calm and show all of your skills. If you're being tested, it means that you have the potential to become a Jonin. It's up to you to prove that you're worthy of being promoted." Naruto smiled. "You're really smart, Samui." Her cheeks flared pink. "Thank you." The memory of what had transpired the day before hit him, and once again, Jiraiya's words came to mind. It'd be easy to just let things slide until Samui went back to the hidden cloud. But that was the coward's way out. "I met my girlfriend yesterday," Naruto said. "She apologized for hurting me. I can't lie, I appreciated that, but I wasn't ready to forgive her." "Did you break up with her?" she asked, quiet, fearful. Naruto's lip curled in a frown. "I didn't. She approached me when I wasn't ready to see her." Samui's eyes turned cold. "Did you find out how she was using you?" "I already knew that. She wasn't cheating on me, but she had ulterior motives." His voice was oddly level, considering the way his heart was hammering against his chest. "Do you want to break up with her?" Naruto flinched, in spite of himself. He couldn't fault her for asking that question, but he definitely didn't want to be confronted by it. "I don't know," Naruto said. He scowled. It was the truth, but it shouldn't have been. "You know what sucks about this? Even though she manipulated me and she lied to me, I can't let my feelings go." He grit his teeth, feeling a pit form in the bottom of his stomach. "I can't trust her, but it's like, I need to know why she was using me and what she gained from doing this." He ran his fingers through his hair. "It isn't easy. It should be, but it isn't." It wasn't like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders, but he felt a bit better about being honest about his struggles. "It isn't easy," Samui said. "It took me some time to confront my ex-boyfriend, and up until I spoke to him, I thought we could reach an understanding. Then he let me know he wasn't worth my tears. What he did stayed with me for a long time, but I got through it. You will, too. A small smile came to his face. Thanks, Samui. Thank me after you've dealt with this, Samui said, a hint of frustration in her tone. She had every right to be frustrated. He was making what should have been an easy decision needlessly complicated. She liked him. She wanted to be with him. But did she say all of that in the heat of the moment? He could ask her, but it would probably be better if he left it. She was going to leave very soon. Again, that felt like the coward's move. He'd already come far, so to back down now would be to defeat himself. He didn't want to keep on grasping at straws to make sense of what little he knew. Can I ask you something, Samui? Go ahead. Naruto stared into her deep blue eyes. They were sharp, cool, but her emotions blazed deep within. He'd seen it for himself, and it excited him like almost nothing else. When you said you wanted to be with me, how did you mean it? I know, it sounds stupid, but I wanted more. Her cheeks rapidly turned red. I want more. Naruto gasped. You really mean it? She nodded, staring back. I was fine with being on my own, but spending all that time with you gave me a glimpse of what I could have. I couldn't muster up the courage to share my feelings until our partnership ended, which left me with no other choice. Naruto blushed, too. It had put him in a rough spot, but at the same time, he enjoyed feeling her. It was really nice. Flattering, you know. If I couldn't be with you, I'd be content if I could end our partnership with a good memory and no regrets. The alliance our villages share still isn't official. That means the chance that we'd be partners again is very slim. He frowned. And I couldn't give you what you wanted. Samui sighed. The last thing I want to do is to help you cheat on your girlfriend. She doesn't deserve that pain. She doesn't. Naruto frowned, feeling his chest grow tight. I'm sorry that I didn't tell you about her, and I'm sorry for leading you on. Samui frowned. Do you regret it? He thought about it, since she wasn't asking if he shouldn't have led him on, only if he regretted it. I should have been honest with you, but honestly, no, I don't. Then I accept your apology. Naruto beamed. At every turn, Samui had accepted him, flaws and mistakes and all, something he genuinely appreciated. He knew what he had with her, and he wasn't willing to lose it because he was caught up in his feelings. Do me a favor, Naruto, fix this. When you talk to your girlfriend, don't let her gain any ground on you. Don't forget what she did. I can't, Naruto said. Good, I'll see you tomorrow. She turned to leave, and it felt like if he let her, he'd lose something big. He grabbed her hand, rooting her to the spot. If there was a way for us to be together, would you be with me? Naruto asked. Yes, I would. No hesitation whatsoever. Then can you wait for me? One long moment passed. Samui curled her fingers around his. I can. A smile came to his face. He let go of her, watched her leave. He had a fight he had to prepare for, but after that, he was going to see Kurenai again. There was no way she'd leave him be. Chapter 40. Fight or Flight. It had been so long since Naruto set foot on Training Ground 3. The brown tree stumps were still there, and probably would be for a long time. Genin other than him had to be tied up there, after all. This was still the place where he became part of a team, where his journey as a Genin really began. Now, he was going to fight a close-range specialist of Tsunade's choosing. A close-range specialist would try to keep him from making hand seals. Even though he wasn't a slouch at close range, it wouldn't be a walk in the park. There wasn't much point in wondering who his opponent could be. Part of being a ninja was adapting to unpredictable situations, something he was quite good at. Earlier this morning, he decided to visit Takeshi at the Dragon's Claw Weapons and Ninja Apparel shop. Takeshi hadn't changed that much. He'd been proud of his growth and as always, he gave him a good deal. He agreed to sell him a variety of customized smoke bombs at a discount, and he also agreed to repair his Tonto whenever he needed it. Samui had taught him how to maintain his weapons, but he wasn't as passionate about it as she was. Overall, he made the most out of his visit. There had been one wrinkle, but he was able to put it out of his mind. He had a fight to focus on. Glad you could make it, Naruto, Tsunade said, hand on her hip. Oddly enough, she wasn't wearing her green coat. Jiraiya was there, which made a decent amount of sense if Tsunade wanted a second opinion. Shizune was Tsunade's right-hand woman. She was also holding Tsunade's coat in her arms. He wasn't sure why Samui or Yugito were around, even though he was pleased to see them both. Finally, there was the third Hokage. Sarutobi didn't react to his penetrating stare, other than a small frown. If he wasn't going to reveal his hand, he'd do the same, and put on a cold front. Less than 5 minutes before your fight and you're daydreaming, Tsunade said. I thought you were ready. I thought this was going to be a private test, Naruto replied. It is private. Shizune will be serving as our healer. Jiraiya's your master, so he'll be sure to fill me in on anything I missed. As for our guests, I thought it would be a good idea to let them watch you put on a good show before they left. There was one other person she failed to mention, but Tsunade smiled, as if she knew what he was thinking. And we can't forget about the professor. I want him to see with his own eyes just how capable you really are, so you'd better not hold anything back. Naruto's lips curled downwards. Who am I going fight? Tsunade smirked. Me. He kept his cold mask up, but he allowed the slightest of smiles to slip past it. Are you sure you want to fight me, Grandma? It's not too late. If Tsunade really was going to fight him, he needed every advantage he could get, and if he had to taunt her to make her mad, then he was going to do it. No one else was a perfect match. Besides, the prospect of fighting you myself was too good to pass up. It lets me see your skills in action firsthand. And, Tsunade slammed her fist into her palm. It lets me work out a bit of frustration. Naruto's throat went dry. To make things fair, I won't use the seal on my forehead. You can't use your seal, either. Neither of us can use the summoning jutsu for a helping hand. This fight ends when someone gets knocked out or 10 minutes pass. He swallowed, and took a second to calm himself. Tsunade had a fierce reputation behind her, but she wasn't unbeatable. He'd do his best, and then do better than that. I'll give you a couple of minutes to get ready. Tsunade went over to Shizune. From what he heard, it sounded like she was giving her attendant some instructions. Naruto chose to speak to Jiraiya. She can't hit you if she doesn't get close to you, Jiraiya said. Everything else is on you to figure out. Good luck. He blew out some hot air. That was what he planned to do, but he would have liked something more practical. He looked at Samui. There wasn't a hint of concern on her face, which meant that she was confident he'd succeed. In response to her nod, he gave her a thumbs up. Like she advised him, he planned to make use of all his skills. Yugito smiled at him. You got this. Don't back down. He smiled at her as Shizune approached him. Ready to start, Naruto? Naruto nodded. I'm ready. He was directed to stand 20 meters away from Tsunade, while Shizune stood in between them. The other spectators watched from the relative safety of the nearby forest. He knew this training ground fairly well, and its abundance of water along with the cover of the trees and the long field of trimmed grass would work out nicely. Begin, Shizune said. Tsunade raised her arms up in a firm fighting stance, but she hadn't moved an inch. Was she waiting for him to make the first move, or trying to psych him out by doing nothing? If she was going to let him attack, then he would see what she could take. First, he made 3 shadow clones. One weaved through hand seals, while the second rushed towards her. Tsunade still hadn't moved. Naruto weaved through 3 hand seals and sucked in air. On the 4th seal, he blew out harsh, nail-biting winds. The 3rd shadow clone turned on the spot and ran towards the lake, just as the first clone's genjutsu infiltrated Tsunade's mind. Naruto placed his own genjutsu before Tsunade could break it, intending to have his shadow clone keep her under pressure with the tanto while it took hold. 2 seconds later, the clone reached Tsunade and slashed at her stomach. She took 1 step back, letting the blade nick her skin, before grabbing the clone's wrist. The clone took the brunt of Naruto's wind jutsu, and it dispelled, smoke spewing around her. She brought her leg up high. The ground imploded, making his last clone stumble from the shockwave. Tsunade got in close and crushed the clone with a single punch. Is that your best? In 4 moves, Tsunade had dismantled his opening salvo, taking minuscule damage to break his genjutsu while countering his clones so quickly that they prevent their destruction. He kept calm. It was just a matter of making an opening for himself. The genjutsu was supposed to be a distraction. She would think he was further away than he was and get complacent. Now, he knew that she probably wouldn't attack unless he did, so he had to try something else. Naruto moved in as Tsunade slipped into her stance, preparing another genjutsu. When he completed his hand seals, he pulled out a kunai and threw it. It was about to make contact with her chest, but she thrust her finger inside the ring, spun it around and gripped the handle. By the time she could throw the kunai, Naruto forced her to dodge or get stabbed by his tanto. She dodged. He lashed out with a rising kick. She dodged that, too, and dodged everything else he threw at her with contemptuous ease. Judging from the smug smile on her face, she was relishing her superiority. Then she lunged with the kunai in her hand. For a moment, he tested his strength against hers. She took the bait and overwhelmed him, or so she assumed. With his other hand, he grabbed Tsunade's wrist and implanted chakra inside her system. A second later, she stabbed his chest. He staggered back. Her eyes became glassy, unfocused. Her jaw wobbled. "Naruto, you're bleeding." Naruto jumped back as far as he could. His timing was perfect, as a wild wave of water swamped Tsunade. It gushed against the trees, petering out. When the water passed, Tsunade was still standing, but she was soaked from head to toe, shivering in her sandals. She was utterly frightened. It was time to finish her off. He made a beeline towards Tsunade, ready to finish this fight. One moment she was frozen. The next, her eyes grew dangerously sharp. She punched his cheek, launching him off his feet and through the air. Naruto hit the ground with a harsh thump, knocking the wind out of his lungs. The clone had come to his aid, but as soon as he left the water, Tsunade threw Naruto's kunai with such force that it burst through the clone's chest and kept on going. Naruto groaned. He leapt to his feet, wincing when he felt his cheek throb. Fortunately, he was still holding his tanto. "That wasn't a bad tactic, Naruto," Tsunade said. "Delaying the activation of your genjutsu is some out-of-the-box thinking, and that genjutsu you used was quite the illusion." He made her think she'd stabbed him. Blood spilled from his wound, flooding the field, which would coincide with the water jutsu his clone used. The way she freaked out made him think that she was out for the count. If he knew she was afraid of blood, he would have used that to his advantage from the start. However, it ended up being a trap. Good thing she hadn't enhanced her punch with chakra, or else he'd be done for. She had taken 2 attacks from him so far, and one of them would be enough to seriously disorient a weaker ninja. Jiraiya had been right. She couldn't hit him if she wasn't close to him. However, she would use herself as bait in order to counter his attacks. "I've seen enough. It's time to put you in your place." Tsunade jumped high. When she landed, dirt and grass and rocks flew all around her, funneling outward like a tornado. Stray debris hit Naruto's chest and arms. In the chaos, Naruto formed 3 clones. The dirt might have separated them, but she barreled through, fist saturated with chakra. His eyes widened like huge plates as he threw himself to the side, rolling out of the way. He caught a smirk on her face as he stood up. One of his clones ran in to join the fray, Rasengan ready to break her back, but Tsunade used her back foot to pivot and slap Naruto's arm to the side. Cutting winds battered them both, slicing through the clone to strike Tsunade. Sensing a quick burst of chakra, Naruto flew through hand seals. Tsunade held her arms in front of her face, quickly being slashed up, but it was only a ruse. She replaced herself with his third clone, who took the hit in her place. However, he was ready, and unleashed a large stream of fire. His last standing clone added fuel to the flames with more wind, turning the stream into a raging inferno. Tsunade was caught in the crossfire, but Naruto wasn't satisfied. Both he and his clone ran towards the trees, and it proved to be the right call. Tsunade had burrowed beneath the earth soon after the inferno appeared, swimming towards them at a frightening rate. His clone grabbed his arm and spun, swinging him high into the air, and for its efforts, Tsunade crushed its jaw with a mighty uppercut. Naruto was still airborne, and if he could summon, he'd have a toad break his fall. However, he had other ways to move. He had 2 more clones throw him at the forest. They fell to level ground, eager to distract Tsunade. He'd found footing in the canopies, taking a second to breathe. Tsunade had an answer for every move he made, and she could take whatever he dished out. Genjutsu wouldn't distract her for long enough, and his parasite trick wouldn't work a second time, since he didn't have a medium he could use to keep her placid. Even layering Genjutsu would take time she wouldn't give him. Her control over her chakra was immaculate, allowing her to detect any oddities in her chakra network the moment they were implanted. As long as she had something to use as a shield, she could avoid his attacks, and even if there wasn't, he couldn't afford to trade blows when she could weave around his attacks like she was a leaf floating in the wind and unleash her super strikes at a moment's notice. His mind was assaulted by memories of his clones' bodies exploding from the sheer force of Tsunade's punches. "Come on out, Naruto," Tsunade said. She'd done it without even blinking. "I need to slap the taste out of your mouth." He lurched, tasting his tongue. It was just words. He had about 3 or so minutes left, and he was so focused on winning that he forgot about the time limit. He didn't have to win, he just had to show off all of his skills. All of them, even ones that he'd just learned or barely used. He had 6 clones run out of the forest. Once they stepped foot on the grass, he put his plan into motion. "No way, Grandma," Naruto said. A breeze blew out throughout the battlefield, and it carried his voice. "You think you're so tough 'cause you can hit really hard, but that's all you have. No ninjutsu, no genjutsu, just fists. How can you call yourself one of the Sannin?" Tsunade frowned. "Cut the crap. I know you're hiding behind your clones like a coward. Is that what you do? Run and hide when you can't kill your enemy in a single shot?" His clones were in position. 3 surrounded her, while the other 3 were spread out. "As long as I win, it doesn't matter how I do it," Naruto said. "NOW. He transformed. You're no match for me, Grandma." The clones surrounding Tsunade dropped black smoke bombs. The clones that were spread out formed a tornado that contained the smoke. Tsunade sneezed, hacking and wheezing from the acrid smoke. These bombs weren't laced with poison, but something more mundane, pepper. He waited for her to make a move, and the instant he sensed movement, he jumped out of the trees. Tsunade had risen from the ground again, and with one fluid kick, she shredded through the bark, splitting the tree in 2. The other Tsunade was still fighting off Naruto's smoke attack. She had less chakra than the Tsunade standing in the forest. When had she made the shadow clone? When he was taking a breather? No, it was just after she had defeated his clones, before he projected his voice. His clones were able to land a killing blow on the other Tsunade, but it didn't matter. Good thing he'd transformed. "Samui, why are you in the trees?" Tsunade asked, stepping over a small piece of bark. "I wanted a better vantage point." She frowned. "Go back to Jiraiya and the other spectators." Samui jumped next to Tsunade. "You won't win. Naruto will find a way to beat you. Let me worry about that. You can nurse your boyfriend back to health before you go home." "That won't be necessary." A smoke bomb clattered to the ground. It released orange smoke, one that had capsaicin, the stuff that made food spicy. "What?" Tsunade's eyes watered up. Samui ducked under Tsunade's swinging backfist and thrust with a thin blade. Tsunade managed to move around it and grabbed Samui's wrist. However, Samui grinned. "Got you, Grandma." The Hokage's face twisted into a rictus of pain as a Rasengan touched her back. Samui disappeared, and when the Rasengan exploded, Tsunade was shot towards the nearest tree. She bounced off it and fell. Naruto blew the smoke away, before breathing in and out in deep gulps. Part of her kimono shirt was burned, revealing a nasty wound. She wasn't moving. She wasn't a clone, either. That was close. That was really close. If she saw through his ruse, it wouldn't have worked. That's why he didn't transform into Jiraiya or Shizune. Instead of lulling her into a false sense of security, he'd make a mistake, whether it was through phrasing or body language, and it would cost him. However, he knew Samui quite well, well enough to impersonate her. He did it once before, in a rather unusual mission. It worked then, and it worked again. Using the Rasengan was also risky. If he didn't have perfect control over it, he might have seriously injured the Hokage in what was supposed to be a spar. Shizune was coming, and he decided to give them a wide berth for his own protection. Just as she went to examine her, Tsunade stood up, like she hadn't taken a Rasengan to her back, like her skin wasn't scalded from the inferno she had barely managed to avoid. "Don't run now, Naruto," Tsunade said. A wicked scowl scarred her face. "Can't even put an old lady down. Pathetic." Naruto took a step back. Then another. And another. "How? I've gone through much worse. Now come on, show some balls and end this." He couldn't run, but he didn't have to fight. He could wait it out. He'd proven himself. And with that one thought, he was able to clamp down on the sheer terror that engulfed his mind. Will himself into coming up with a new plan, another method of attack. She couldn't have been at full strength, there was no way. "Time," Shizune said. Naruto's heart hammered against his chest. Tsunade pushed her chin up, staring him in the face. For a second, he thought she'd ignore Shizune and try to separate his head from his shoulders. Then, her scowl gave way to a smile. "Looks like the fight's over," Tsunade said, making Naruto sigh from utter relief. She stepped forward and bit back a gasp. My back." Shizune immediately pressed her hands against Tsunade's back. Combined with Tsunade's own healing, the injuries she sustained were patched up, allowing her to move unimpeded. "Do you need any help, Naruto?" Shizune asked. He nodded. A purple bruise had taken shape on his cheek. Shizune gently set a palm bathed in green chakra on it, soothing his aches and pains. In less than a minute, his injury was gone. "You're amazing, Shizune." Shizune smiled. "You're welcome." The way Shizune was at hand to soothe Tsunade's aches reminded him of his own efforts to help Samui. The fact that Tsunade and Samui were similarly blessed was just a coincidence. "Do you help out I mean, the Hokage whenever she has back problems?" Naruto asked. "I do," Shizune said. "Most of the time, though, Lady Tsunade can take care of herself." "It's something I worked on once the problem came up," Tsunade said. "Trade secret." Naruto snorted. "Just like your anti-aging jutsu, right?" He slapped his hands to his mouth. "Sorry. Forget I said that. Let's get back to the others," Tsunade said. She smirked. "Unless you want to go another round." "I think he's had enough," Shizune said. She was right, even though he wouldn't say it out loud. Together, they reached the main field of the training ground. It had seen better days. Flames still ate at the grass, parts of the field had been uprooted or crushed, and there were puddles and pools of water large enough to wade through. "We really did all this?" Naruto asked. "We did," Tsunade said. "I'll have a full assessment written up for you soon, but I got what I wanted from our spar." Naruto smiled. "It was a pretty tough fight." "Well, I couldn't take you lightly," Tsunade said. "And besides, your head was getting too big for your shoulders." If that was what she wanted to call it, he wasn't going to argue. He'd wait until some time had passed before he tried his luck. "Why would you call Lady Tsunade Grandma, Naruto?" Shizune asked. He shrugged. "We're related." Shizune frowned. "That might be the case, but our Hokage isn't your grandmother, so she deserves the proper form of address." "She can take it." Tsunade grabbed her coat and pulled it on. "You're lucky I can. Some people might take offense." Shizune sighed. "As long as no one's feelings are hurt." "Don't worry, Shizune, I know what I'm doing," Tsunade said. "At least he hasn't called you princess," Sarutobi said. Along with Jiraiya, Samui and Yugito, the third had deigned to join them. Tsunade rolled her eyes. "I'd prefer if you kept that to yourself, Sarutobi-sensei. Besides, I think you've done more than enough to shape Naruto's mind." Sarutobi had a sad little frown on his face, but he'd get no sympathy from Naruto. "Yes, of course. However, due praise must be given, and Naruto was quite excellent throughout this fight." Naruto felt a tinge of something white-hot, as joy from Sarutobi's honest praise was consumed by fury he forced back down. He chose to nod. "When the fight went into the forest, I thought we were going to miss out," Jiraiya said. "Luckily, Sarutobi-sensei let us peer through his crystal ball." "Not bad, Naruto." "Thanks, sensei," Naruto said. He'd seen the crystal ball before, but he hadn't paid it any mind. Maybe that was why the old man always seemed to know what he was doing. It was yet another thing he planned to ask him when the time came. One meeting at a time. That was one hell of a fight, Naruto, Yugito said. Makes me wonder how I'd do against you. If I'm ever in the hidden cloud, maybe we'll find out. Yugito smiled at him. I'm looking forward to it. Samui stared at him. Just what I'd expect. He managed to last 10 minutes against Tsunade, pulling off all sorts of tricks off, even managing to force her on the back foot. He learned a couple of good things from the fight, and hopefully, he made a strong enough impression on Tsunade to get promoted. He still had a long way to go if he wanted to reach her level, let alone the Akatsuki, but he was closer than he'd ever been, closer to achieving his goals. Now that his fight with Tsunade was over, there was one matter left to resolve, seeing Samui and Yugito off before they returned home. Since it was lunchtime, Naruto escorted them to Yakiniku-Q, a restaurant that specialized in barbecue. Shikamaru's team were frequent customers, but this was the first time he'd set foot inside on his own initiative. The steak sizzled on the grill, the tender meat sliding off the kebab stick and melting in his mouth. You must be so flattered that Naruto knew you so well, huh, Samui? Yugito said, grinning like, well, a cat. I'd be surprised if he failed to impersonate me, Samui said. They were sitting next to each other, with Yugito facing them. If anything, he's only improved. Naruto smiled. I'm just glad that it worked. The conversation turned to other topics, like what they'd been up to during their stay in the Leaf. He found out that Samui had taken a long nap after reaching the Ambassador Hotel, since she was still tired and sore. As for Yugito, she had gone on a tour of the village over the past couple of days. I ran into someone you knew, Naruto, Yugito said. Hinata Hyuga. Really? Naruto asked, before it hit him. What did she say? Yugito frowned. She told me about how Neji was doing. He was doing fine when we saw him, Samui said, after finishing off a slab of meat. You guys met him? Yugito asked. She tore into some juicy ribs, but she seemed distracted, almost. In the land of rivers. We worked on a mission together. Yugito swallowed her food, wiping her mouth with a napkin. He's off on a mission right now. Can you believe that? Hinata told me everything he did to recover in painstaking detail. I got the impression she wasn't very fond of what I did. She frowned. Again, I don't blame her. It was an official tournament, Samui said. And Neji was willing to kill you. He'd already killed one of our comrades, and he would have killed Hiromi. I wasn't in any real danger, and I crippled him. The Hokage couldn't completely fix his right hand, so he has to go in for treatment after every mission to heal it, and he had to adjust his fighting style to compensate for the injury. Even if he became a better person, it shouldn't have come at such a high cost. Naruto frowned. He couldn't imagine going through such an injury, and it was Neji who had tried to convince him to end Deidara's suffering before Samui had convinced him to finish Deidara off. It seemed like he wasn't the only one who was troubled, as Samui pursed her lips. I noticed. Neji showed great courage in finding a way to continue living as a ninja. That hasn't erased what he did. She glanced at Naruto. I can forgive, but I will never forget. Yugito shook her head. I get not forgetting, but I can't hold someone's past against them if they're different now. That's the kind of stuff I don't try to hold onto. You're free to have that opinion, Samui said. What else did Hinata talk about? Naruto asked, trying to diffuse the building tension. Lots of things. Honestly, I thought she'd be a wallflower, but that girl found a spine. I wonder how she'd do if you two had a rematch. Naruto shrugged. I wouldn't underestimate her. Like Yugito said, Hinata found a spine. She wouldn't let him run over her. After they finished their lunch, Samui and Yugito decided to pay the fee, including his share. He would have paid for it, but they insisted. He didn't forget to thank them. He walked with them to the village gates, and when they reached them, he stopped while they walked just past the entrance. So, this is it, he said. It is, Yugito said. She turned around. A wide smile appeared on her face. It was good seeing you, Naruto. Thanks for everything. Naruto smiled. Don't mention it. You'd do the same for me, right? That's right. Yugito wrapped him up in a fierce hug, pecking him on the cheek before pushing him over to Samui. 1,000,001 emotions were visible in her deep, vibrant blue eyes. He didn't have to overthink this, just speak from the heart. There was a lot he wanted to say to her, but would a simple look or expression be enough to convey what he felt? He didn't want to say goodbye. Why don't you escort us part of the way, Naruto? Yugito asked. Naruto broke away from Samui's unflinching gaze. Good idea. There was a lot riding on his mind, but for the time being, he put those thoughts aside so he could live in the moment. After all, he might never have another chance to spend time with Samui, or Yugito for that matter. For the next hour or so, Naruto ran alongside his friends from the hidden cloud, enjoying the conversation he had with them. Apparently, a contingent of Cloud Ninja would be meeting them once they entered the Land of Frost. Just because the Akatsuki were currently busy didn't mean they could afford to take any chances. He planned to be gone before that. Part of him wanted this moment to last forever, so he didn't have to return home alone and confront a reality that seemed to be inevitable in so many ways. Part of him thought about leaving the Hidden Leaf altogether, finding a place to stay in the cloud with Samui. Maybe he could become Raikage one day. Or maybe not. He wouldn't abandon his home. His mind was just wandering. He thought he was ready, but he was still uncertain, unsure if he could handle things properly by himself. He'd been so grateful for the help he had, and he knew that he'd never be alone. It was just strange that he'd already reached this point. We're here, Samui said. Naruto frowned. Yeah, Yugito chuckled to herself. I'll give you two some time to say goodbye. She walked away from them, just outside of an ordinary ninja's hearing distance. All this time had let him think about exactly what he wanted to say. Thank you, Samui, Naruto said. Thank you for teaching me how to use a sword. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for being so incredible. I couldn't have asked for a better partner. You're welcome, Samui said. I enjoyed every minute with you. So did he. Naruto hugged her, arms secured around her waist. She immediately returned his embrace, and he savored her warmth, the comfort he felt by holding her in his arms and being held by someone who trusted him and cared about him. Eventually, he had to let go. When he did, Samui set her hand on his cheek, rubbing his whiskers. You know what to do, Samui said. I know. She took her hand away, and kissed him in the same place, before kissing the other. Fireworks burst in his brain and warmed up his face, causing a pink blush to spread from cheek to cheek. Farewell, Naruto. Not goodbye, Naruto asked. Samui smiled, revealing pearly white teeth. I will see you again. I don't know when or how, but I'll find a way. That's why I won't say goodbye. Naruto's smile grew until he could barely contain it. Then I won't say goodbye, either. I'll see you soon. His partner and his friend walked away, not out of his life, but to join Yugito so that they could return home. He watched both of them leave until they left his sight, and continued to sense them until their chakra signatures left his vision. Naruto stood there long after they left, taking in the sun beaming on his face and arms, the smell of the pine trees and fresh grass, the brisk wind whipping against his clothes. He was finally on his own. Was he ready? Truly ready? He turned around, took in a deep breath and let it out. He'd be all right, no matter what happened. All the butterflies in his stomach couldn't take that away from him. Nothing could, because when he set his mind to doing something, he wouldn't let anything stop him until it was done. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.